As harsh winter conditions continue to grip Ukraine, systematic Russian strikes are pushing the country's energy infrastructure to its limits. Why are Ukraine's power grid and heating systems so vulnerable to Russian attacks? Power crisis and its direct impact on civilians. On February 7th, Russia carried out a large-scale strike against Ukraine's power grid facilities, causing widespread blackouts across the country. Energy expert Stanislav Ignatiev told Telegraph that in February, the capital is expected to have electricity for only 4 to 6 hours per day. Many substations have been destroyed, so power can only be supplied to areas where transmission and distribution are still possible. These attacks have severely disrupted hospital operations, transportation systems, and, in particular, the daily lives of vulnerable populations. Many residents are unable to cook or heat their homes, as temperatures in several regions have at times fallen to minus 20 degrees Celsius. The situation has become so serious that local authorities have been forced to set up emergency heating tents to help civilians stay warm. So, what makes Ukraine's energy infrastructure especially vulnerable? Russia's deep knowledge of Ukraine's power grid. Russia has accumulated extensive knowledge of Ukraine's centralized energy system dating back to the period when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union, an advantage that most external actors do not possess. For decades, Ukraine's electricity system was connected to Russia and Belarus as part of the unified Soviet-era grid and was described as being closely integrated with Russia's energy structure. This does not mean that Ukraine depended on Russia for its energy supply. However, for a long time, Russia played a central role in frequency regulation and in balancing supply and demand across the wider regional network. As a result, Moscow has a detailed understanding of the technical structure of Ukraine's grid, including its key nodes and its most vulnerable points. Ukraine's heavy reliance on centralized power generation. Ukraine's energy system relies heavily on nuclear power. Around half of the country's electricity is generated by nuclear power plants, while coal-fired thermal power plants account for about 23% and gas-fired plants about 9%. All of these sources reflect a highly centralized power generation model. This makes Ukraine's challenges more severe than in many other countries because urban water supply, wastewater systems, and especially heating services are also organized in a centralized manner, commonly referred to as district heating systems. District heating, a critical weakness in winter Ukraine, still relies extensively on district heating systems, dating back to the Soviet era, most of which run on natural gas. In Kyiv, the share of households using district heating is particularly high, especially in apartment blocks built during the 1960s. Each district heating system can serve tens of thousands of residents across multiple buildings. These systems depend heavily on fixed physical infrastructure, including large pipelines and pumping stations, to keep hot water circulating. In principle, thermal power plants heat water and then send it through pipelines to intermediate pumping stations, which distribute it to residential buildings. However, if electricity is lost while the pipes remain full of water, the water can freeze and cause the pipes to burst. With temperatures dropping sharply, this represents a particularly serious threat. The centralized nature of this infrastructure also makes it highly vulnerable to physical attacks. The destruction of just one major transmission pipeline or the shutdown of a key pumping station can disable the heating system for an entire district, especially during winter. Ukraine struggles to restore its power grid after systematic strikes. On February 3rd, according to Ukrainian intelligence, Russia launched another large-scale strike using missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles worth an estimated $325 million against energy facilities across Ukraine. The attacks caused severe and long-lasting damage to the country's energy system. Russian forces have focused on what Ukrainian officials describe as the backbone nodes of the national power grid, including strategic substations such as the 550 kilovolt Vinnytsia substation and the 750 kilovolt Kyivska substation. The loss of 550 kilovolt and 750 kilovolt equipment has severely reduced Ukraine's ability to transmit electricity over long distances, automatically creating power shortages even in areas where generation capacity still exists. Experts warn that restoration could take many months or even years because the equipment used at these facilities is highly specialized. Another factor complicating repairs is Russia's use of so-called double tap strikes, in which a second attack follows shortly after the first. This tactic places emergency responders and repair crews in particularly dangerous situations while they are attempting to restore electricity and heating services. Ukrainian authorities are therefore forced to constantly balance the urgent need to repair infrastructure with the risks faced by workers on the ground. In Kyiv, the situation is considered especially severe. The CHP-6 plant has been largely destroyed, while the CHP-4 plant in the Darnitsia district has been taken offline for an extended period. These two facilities previously provided electricity and heat to a large part of the capital. As a result, Kyiv is now almost entirely dependent on electricity transmitted from outside the city, a major technical challenge even in peacetime, and far more difficult under conditions of repeated damage to transmission networks. Ukrainian officials acknowledge that this is the most difficult period since the start of the war for Kyiv's energy system. The situation in Ukraine shows that in modern warfare, energy infrastructure is no longer merely an economic asset, but a strategic battlefield in its own right. Russia's focus on key nodes of the power grid and district heating systems is placing enormous pressure on Ukraine's ability to sustain civilian life and maintain the functioning of its rear areas during winter. In the coming months, analysts believe the resilience of Ukraine's energy infrastructure will be one of the key factors shaping the ability of major cities, especially Kyiv, to endure. Global Military Update will continue to monitor and report on developments related to Ukraine's energy, infrastructure, and strategic security situation.